Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is Integrative Medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Well, welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we're here every Monday at 5 o'clock on WVOX 1460 AM and worldwide at WVOX.com. As you heard me say many times, the subject really explores the idea that health is not just about our bodies and what physicians typically measure and tell us is working or not working, but it's more a state of being, how we really feel, and how our life is flowing and going. And so much of this conversation involves people who are our neighbors, typical people who, live lives like we do, face many of the same challenges, and have to deal with that in conjunction with their families, their businesses. And we understand that life can be relatively stressful, but there are ways that we can find balance. And that's the essence of this show, is to explore that with real people and to include you in this conversation. So I want you to write down the number. It's 914-636-0110. If you were listening last week, you heard me speak to 5 students from the Bronx High School for Science and Mathematics who were just absolutely extraordinary. These are young people who grew up in an area of the inner city without a lot of the accoutrements that we find in a lot of the suburban areas of this region, who really had to work for it, yet their perspective was so uplifting. And it got me to think about how important it is to bring more of those voices here onto the show to really explore with us the thoughts and ideas, again, of common people. We have so many talking heads out there that are filling our minds with ideas. There's a lot of images out there that fill our visual cortex with the notion that there are a lot of things that are scary, but there's so many things that are uplifting. And so I want to keep that the theme of today's show as well. And if you want to hear that show from last week, you can next week, because I'm going to be away. So I'm going to rerun that show next week. And I call that show something along the lines of the paradox. One of the students used that word, the paradox of closed-mindedness. And I think it's an extraordinary show that you might want to listen to again. But today I have other guests, other neighbors, Carolyn and Dave Frost, who live in Pelham and who recently opened a business, a yoga studio, you might call it, called Balance Yoga and Wellness, which they took over from a pre-existing business, Yoga Palestra, and previously Larchmont Yoga. You may know of it. We know a lot about yoga being so popular these days, but I wonder if we really understand its intention. I mean, it's, for many people, a physical exercise, which is fine. For many people, it's a way to get out there and to move their body and to be there with other people and to find some peace and tranquility. But there's a lot to be said about yoga. And that's one of the things I want to explore, and I want to connect that dot, the idea of yoga as a practice, something that many of us could consider doing, and information about that with the people who are here with me today in the studio, to explore how they got to where they are, why this is important to them. Because, as you know, when I talk about slow medicine and the slow medicine wheel of health, which is an image that has 7 petals, sort of like a flower, 7 petals. One is life's purpose. And each of us has a calling. And I think it's very important when we find that calling that we get on that path and execute it. That's where we find our own greater strength and vitality and ultimately the balance that we seek. So once again, I want to invite you to call us if you hear something that's interesting that you want to join in. The number is 914-636-0110. and say welcome to Carolyn and Dave Frost, because, as I said, this is a community show in some ways. I mean, although it broadcasts all over the place, what I like, especially when we can be in the same room together as we are now, really relate to the fact that this is a world we share. We have a lot in common, and that people are out there working very hard to support their families and to take care of themselves. What I'd like to hear from you to start, I guess, is how you got to where you are in terms of your own perspective and how you're living your lives, and then how that connects to the specific business and your passion for yoga and what you're doing here in Larchmont.
Well, thank you very much for having us. We're thrilled to be here on your show, and love your approach with this show. And I guess to answer your question, I grew up in Pelham. And I think, as I mentioned when we walked in, my mom was actually has been on the station as she was a professor of nursing at the College of New Rochelle. So I have great memories actually of hearing her on the radio. So if we've now gone full circle, which is great, and she was thrilled when she learned I was on it. But grew up in Pelham, went to Pelham High School, and was very active in athletic. Played 3 sports in high school, played a sport in college, and then was thrown into the very hectic and crazy life of Wall Street right out of college, and have been on Wall Street now for almost 18 years. But how I came to find yoga was really out of desperation. As somebody who had been very active my whole life and pride myself on athletics, I got to a point where I wasn't even 30 years old and I couldn't touch my toes. I was spending the majority of my day at a desk with very bad posture, on phones and typing away on the computer, and had very high levels of stress, very high levels of anxiety, and became convinced as I did more and more research into understanding what was happening to my body, that it was almost entirely driven by stress and anxiety and not anything physical. But I had a herniated disc in my neck. I had a bulging disc in my lower back. And just to do the basics of tying my shoe became very arduous. And my initial response was the Western medical approach, which was going to doctors and receiving pain medication. I was receiving epidural shots. I was told to lay off all activities. And, really just as I was sitting on my mom and dad's couch at 29 years old, having just received an epidural shot, just told myself there has to be a better way. And I have to give a lot of credit to my sister, who introduced me to Bikram yoga in New York City, and started doing research about Bikram yoga. Realized that the founder, Bikram Chaudhry, was himself told at one point he wasn't even going to be able to walk. He had a lot of significant physical disabilities, and he came up with Bikram yoga and the concept of heat and yoga because he, like me, needed the heat to provide flexibility, to provide change. And between that and just doing research on Eastern medicine and our body's ability to heal itself, found a life-changing experience in hot yoga. 10 years later, I'm happy to announce that I'm in the best physical shape of my life, and probably even more importantly, the best mental shape of my life. And the benefits have been innumerable. And believed so strongly in it that Carolyn and I bought a yoga studio just a little less than a year ago now.
Your story could be reproduced probably by most people who are listening, that at some point in their life, something catches up with them, that if we don't attend to it, even though we might have been athletic as a young person and have the means to do it, like being in school, is organized. Once we get out into the quote-unquote real world, people lose sort of the time to some extent, but also the requirement, and therefore we sort of let it go, and then life catches up, and then our bodies often, and this is the story, in our late 20s, sort of starts becoming... And, we identify ailments that we carry, and people wind up then going to traditional doctors, getting traditional approaches. Often they could be helpful. But when they're not, people are left with that question that you answered. Well, maybe there's something else. And often there's somebody else in our life, like our sister, that will show us that there are other approaches. And then not only does our physical body improve, but what I really liked about what you said too were a couple things. But one was that your mental health is the best it's ever been. Yeah. And the other is that you're also doing something in your life separate from your job that sounds to me more like a passion purpose type of thing, which is, one of the key elements when we think about how we're going to be healthy. It's not just the exercise or what we eat, but it's our relationships with other people, of course, in the natural world. It's something more sacred, the divine, but also with ourself, with what it is we're here to do. And if that piece is missing, people can go through the motions, I think, of a lot of action and a lot of lists of the shoulds, so they do them well, and they might be very disciplined, and they still don't get the results. So I appreciate your story and sharing it like that, and it doesn't surprise me that, the name of your place is Balance, Yoga, and Wellness, because it's saying something about what's going to be achieved here.
Absolutely.
With yoga.
Right.
So, Carolyn, tell me a little bit about how you fit into this.
So I have a little bit of a different backstory than Dave. I actually was not very athletic growing up at all. And so was pretty sedentary, actually, throughout all of my younger years. And so going through college and then sort of living in the city as an adult. And then I met Dave, and Dave is actually the one who introduced me to Bikram yoga. And so I had done like a handful of yoga classes here and there, but doing Bikram yoga together became this thing that Dave and I did together. Like we did like every Friday night, we would do yoga and then go get massages and then have dinner. And it became this sort of thing that we shared together. And through this yoga practice, I really found a passion for myself doing something active that I never really had before. And so it became something for me that was really sort of nice to know for myself that I could be athletic and I could be active in a different way than, for example, like playing tennis. And so we would go and have these great nights. And, we always would talk about like one day we'll open we'll open a yoga and wellness center. And truly we thought it would be, 10 years from now, not, sitting in our house. I was pregnant with our fourth baby, and we were like, I guess we should do this. Should we buy this yoga studio? And sometimes I think in life, something sort of comes along and you have to take advantage of it, even if when it's not sort of the timing that we had in mind, but it became for us sort of the right thing to do, despite all of the challenges that were sort of happening around us. And so for me, I always had this sort of strong Bikram yoga practice. And then when I had babies, I didn't want to practice Bikram yoga. Some people do, but for me, it didn't feel like the right thing to do. And so I got turned on to the vinyasa style of yoga. And so I would do prenatal yoga, and so did a variety of yoga practices. And really something about the vinyasa practice really resonated with me. And so for, many years while I was, being pregnant and raising these young kids, I found the vinyasa practice to really sort of be something for me that I really was drawn to. And so at this studio, which is nice because we have both Bikram yoga and the vinyasa, and so we're able to practice both. I'm able to do Bikram still, and I think that our my Bikram practice really sort of complements my vinyasa practice and vice versa. I'm stronger for doing both of them. I also find that, in the days, because I can't do it every day because we have responsibilities and things like that, but on the days that I do yoga, I am infinitely more patient with my family, with my kids. It's just, life is a little bit easier when I've had this 60 minutes or 90 minutes to just spend time on myself, focusing inward, breathing, being in stillness with myself really gives me a different perspective on the whole day. And so it's been really great, and it's been fun and busy and a crazy challenge, but finding the balance here has been really rewarding for us.
Yeah, it's, a couple things you've said that I like is the idea that you may not have selected this particular time to get it started.
No.
However, you had discussed this earlier,
right,
and planted the seeds together,
right,
in a thought form at that moment, which was that maybe one day, And then when the opportunity crossed your path, which was not of your choosing in terms of time, whatever, you recognized it because you did spend some time dreaming, envisioning. And one of the things I say to people about life's purpose is just because you identify doesn't mean you have to do it immediately. But what you did was really what I generally recommend, which is create a vision board of some sort. Whether that's in your mind or on your refrigerator, or just get it going so that when it crosses your path, you'll recognize it. And you'll appreciate that perhaps the universe or some other entity, energy is guiding you, that this is the moment. And you'll have the energy you might not have thought previously would have been available to you, when you have doubts about that sort of thing, because it'll be so stunning when the opportunity presents itself and connects to that very, well-developed image. So it's one thing that you did, which I think is a takeaway for people who are listening. The other thing, though, I think is wisdom that you shared, which is maybe where I want to go with this. And again, if you're listening and you want to call in, here's the subject, which is you don't have enough time. Most people say, yoga sounds lovely, exercise sounds lovely, taking a walk in the woods sounds lovely. I just don't have time for it. Where am I going to get the 60 or 90 minutes? Well, I have to sacrifice something to do it. The wisdom, though, that I heard from you was when you did that, it added to your life. That time, yes, was a commitment of some time, and you obviously did something wasn't being done as a result. However, the net positive of how you feel, the quality of your time doing other things, probably I'd ask you to confirm, but I'm going to guess that it made everything you did more efficient so that you needed less time for all the other things.
100%.
So that in the end, it wasn't an add of time. You didn't really have to sacrifice anything significant. And so this is the wisdom. Can we, and the question for people listening is, so when you say to yourself, I can't take this time for myself, how can we help people, the three of us here in the room, help people, encourage them to take that time?
Yeah. Well, there's a great saying, and Carolyn posted this on our site about meditation. And we have a meditation class as a part of our vinyasa class offerings on Wednesday nights. But it says you should meditate for 20 minutes a day. And if you don't have the time, you should meditate for 60 minutes a day. And I think you touched right on it. And that's the concept of balance is none of us have enough balance in our lives. And if you can't commit 60 to 90 minutes to yourself, at least, once, twice, 3 times a week, then you really do need to look back inside and understand, what's going on. Right. Because I know for me, my body was manifesting itself physically that I needed much more balance. I needed much more focus on physical and mental health. And I wasn't providing it for myself. So hopefully for the majority of those listening out there, it doesn't take physical ailments and that you can be proactive in terms of providing this for yourself. The medical benefits, as you well know, are countless. And we're just now really starting to understand not only yoga, but the whole Eastern medical approach and allowing our bodies to heal themselves. I know from firsthand experience that your body can heal yourself without, the interventions that we're often, I think, just that we all feel we have to accept that Western medicine is the best medical systems in the world, and it has to be treated medically. Not always, and there's certainly a place for it, and often it can be a complement. But if there's something that I have come away from this experience fully subscribing to, our vision boards, are your ability to have such a greater control than we're ever taught to believe, I think, growing up in the society we grow up in, and how much more control you have over your body and both your physical, mental capacity, but also just the direction of your life. You have so much more control than I think we're ever taught growing up.
Yeah, it's a paradox here, because when people put that off, they don't take that step.
Right.
They lose time. They'll lose time somewhere. It might be in the end, when the end comes too soon, or dysfunction becomes so great that even if somebody lives the same number of years, the quality of that life is substantially diminish.
Right.
And so this is why I use that word wisdom. There's tremendous wisdom in finding a way to reorganize one's approach to their own life and living, to take the time that they need to make sure this is dealt with. And it's the best part of it, though, is it's very pleasant. You know, it's not work. It's not efforting. It might be an effort to get there on time.
Right.
It might be an effort to figure out how to rearrange the schedule a little bit, and so you need a babysitter,
right.
or you need somebody to drive you, or whatever the logistics are. I get it. That adds up in people's lives and can be part of the headache. However, once you're lying on a mat, as an example, once you're in that room, once you're in that environment, once
right.
you realize, as most yoga teachers have told me at the end of the class, thank yourself for taking care of yourself for this last 90 minutes, that you really give yourself a hug and an appreciation. It is a good affirmation about what goes on. And then from the medicine point of view, Dave, which you mentioned is very true, the slow medicine concept here is that if we can get out of the fight or flight chronic stress response, the sympathetic overdrive, we can give our body time to heal. And 60 or 90 minutes is quite a lot.
Yeah.
And if we could do that only a couple of times a week, even if we just start and say, we'll do it once a week.
Once a week, right.
There
30
is
minutes, whatever it is.
Tremendous impact in terms of what our body can accomplish in that period of time.
Yeah.
And it's not something I want to underestimate in terms of its impact. So I want to hear from people who are listening, because I know there's resistance. There is people like like you're running a business, right? So you would like all your classes to be filled, right? And maybe they are. I don't know, but maybe for any business person, that some days you have vacancies, and so there's all the people walking outside. There's plenty of those. So the question is, how do we get people to take that step? And so please call us, 914-636-0110. We're going to take a break now. So write that number down and formulate a question in your mind and tell us what it is that you feel in resistance. And maybe we can talk with you to just figure out a strategy to help you along and help all the people who are listening, because we know it's common. So the number is 914-636-0110. You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio, and we'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered, experiential, and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of the fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and today I'm speaking with Carolyn and Dave Frost, who are the new owners of Balance Yoga and Wellness in Larchmont. Not so new, right? You said about a year.
Just about a year, yeah.
And fulfilling a dream, if you will, but also providing a service to all of us. One is the work itself, the studio, where anyone in this area could visit, obviously, and take advantage of this particular very personal approach to yoga and wellness, but also the idea that we all can benefit from listening to the words of wisdom about taking time to care for yourself and figuring out what that might be. Yoga is one of those things that is now becoming so mainstream, so popular, and it's quite available. So I think that's very important. And if you want to join in this conversation, please call us, 914-636-0110. As a reminder, recently we were just talking about why it is that people resist carving out some of that time for themselves. And we know it's a pretty common situation. People have a lot of information. They know how to take better care of themselves, and yet it's sometimes a challenge to do that. Stress itself is one of the things that incapacitates us, producing a certain amount of inertia that can barely take care of the things we have to, and so we don't really have the mental energy to make plans for something else. But that's what we really want to talk about. So again, the number is 914-636-0110. Let's get back to your practices of yoga, though, the vinyasa being one piece of it, and then the hot yoga being the other. And we were talking before the show aired about hot yoga in particular. There can be misconceptions. Is it healthful or not? Caroline, you mentioned when you were pregnant, you weren't sure that you wanted to put yourself in that room. But I don't know if that's because it was just physically uncomfortable to be so hot when you were also...
Right, yeah. It's a little bit... For me, it was. But there are other women who continue to practice throughout their pregnancy. But for me, it just was a little... And also, I thought maybe I wasn't supposed to do it, just like misconceptions surrounding that.
But that's the point. So people get nervous sometimes when it's hot. And even there are people who have experiences in heat where they get panicky. Claustrophobia is not an uncommon experience for some people. Thinking about it even from the Ayurvedic point of view, people with different constitutions may or may not really be comfortable in extreme temperatures, whether it's cold or hot. But there are benefits, Dave, as you said, in terms of when you are warmer, your muscles are more limber. And so if part of the activity you're then going to do, which requires a certain amount of flexibility, is assisted by just the environment. And that's a pretty intelligent design, if you will. So tell us, though, about how hot is it? And what are some of those questions that you probably get all the time about, is this good for me? Is this a problem? I have a medical ailment. What do you usually say to people?
Sure. So the vinyasa classes are typically heated 90 to 95 degrees. And a
warm summer day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, warm summer day. Right.
And the Bikram classes are at 105 degrees and 40% humidity. But you hit it right on the head in terms of this practice was designed by somebody who was told he was never going to walk. I could not touch my toes when I started my practice. The heat, like you said, has obviously a physical effect on your body that allows you to change. And frankly, if I walked into a cold room with the condition I was in, I was not capable of really creating that change. But the health benefits are innumerable. And one of the things we talk a lot about is detoxing. And the heat allows you to detox. And I'll give you a great example. We have several members of the New Rochelle Fire Department that practice at our studio, and they prefer the more intense, higher heat Bikram class. And as one of them told me, he had fought a fire on a Saturday. He took class on a Wednesday. And in that class on Wednesday, the smoke was literally coming out of his body, 5 days later. And there's a professional football player who practices, a gentleman named Jason Hatcher, who said that he, after the rigors of a football game, will take Bikram to detoxify all of the the Powerades and the sugary drinks and all of the things that you sort of need to, I guess, compete at that level, but that he knows aren't necessarily good for you, but gives him, the energy and gives him the strength to get through a football game. But it's fascinating to hear how somebody coming away from an athletic activity feels that the heat is beneficial to detoxing what he has to do to his body to prepare and perform at the top level of a sporting event. So I think the misconceptions are exactly what you touched on before. People will get into that room, and I did it. I tried to walk out 4 times in my first class. Mm-hmm. It's that fight or flight response, and you're in a very uncomfortable position, and your initial reaction is to leave. And it took me, and this is what we always encourage when people take their first class, you can sit through the whole first class and it will be a success if you just get through that class.
Just sit on your mat.
Exactly, exactly. And allow your body to acclimate and work on that fight or flight response. 10 years later, as an avid practitioner, I will still be looking at myself, sweating profusely, as Carolyn knows, and having to convince myself that I will get through this class. 10 years into it. So what I love about it is it is the same 26 postures, at least in Bikram, and Vinyasa is great, as Carolyn said, because it's a different class each time, and they each have their place. But what I love about it is that it's as much of a challenge, especially mentally now, less so physically, than it was in day one. And that's when I know that I'm still growing, and I'm still, it's as we always say, it's a journey, and it's a practice. It's not a perfect, and it's just a matter of the progress that you see. Like you said, at the end of each class, you're supposed to acknowledge it because you really are giving a gift to yourself, and we don't do that enough.
Well, the idea that we're being mindful, to stay in the room just requires an internal conversation about this. Stay in, relax, breathe. That's the requirement, and that's the mantra, if you will, to tolerate the discomfort. And that's separate from then what you're practicing, meaning those 26 postures and movements get there are all part of just a flow and an understanding that when we move different parts of the body the different way and combine that with profuse sweating, there is a real benefit from the point of view of our ability to move things through our skin that really deserve to get out of our body. And it assists our respiratory tract in releasing toxins, carbon dioxide being the principal one, and other gases. But then our bowels and our kidneys, the skin, most people don't realize is the largest organ of our body. It has tremendous surface area and can really do a lot for us in terms of releasing stuff that's broken and needs to come out. And it's very energizing.
Yes.
Most people experience. Most yoga is quite energizing because the movements are not arbitrary movements. For people who may not be familiar, and I'm not the teacher here, you guys are, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of it is these movements might have funny names and they may look a little weird, but they're precise understanding of how energy flows through the body and then how to align energy or open channels so that energy moves. And there's a brilliance to it. It's a several thousand-year-old practice that, if you will, is scientific because when it was developed, it was truly developed based on results.
Right.
The results being somebody could sit and meditate for 3 hours if that was the intended plan at the time. And to do that required tremendous tolerance and ability and sustainability. So it's a prototypical practice, I believe.
Yeah, it is. And you hit it right on the head in terms of growing up as an athlete. I would do something in heat or not in heat for an hour and a half, any athletic activity where you're exerting as much energy and effort, and you'd come away tired. And what opened my eyes to this practice was, there were times I was burning 1,000 calories, especially early on, and losing weight and coming away from the practice, and you have more energy. And it was such a Western approach versus Eastern approach. I didn't even understand how that was possible. And then I slept so well. And I was reading recently about Aaron Rodgers, who quarterbacked the Green Bay Packers, and he found that the biggest benefit for him was being able to sleep better. Yep. It's amazing, as you see. It's a very personal kind of benefit that you see, and there's so many different ways that you see it. But everybody has almost a different. This is what it really does for me. It provides energy, even though I've just worked out in a very intense fashion for an hour and a half, or I sleep better, or I lost weight, or I'm eating better, as a result. But it's the benefits that come from it, and from such an intense, rigorous exercise is almost goes counter to what we were thought growing up.
Well, a lot of that has to do with what, as we said, we're taught to believe that there's a certain quantum of energy that we have.
Right.
Maybe we use the word calories, so like calories in, calories out. The concept of food provides our calories, but the fact is that what gets our body to move are parts of our brain. And when our brain is focused on one movement, let's say throwing a ball, that's using one part of our brain. When our brain is focused on breathing to a certain rhythm, that's another part of our brain. When our focus is on moving our body into downward-facing dog, that's another part of our brain. And so we may have already expended the energy to throw a ball. We may have already expended the energy to do work in an office. But when we come to a yoga class, we're using a different part of our brain, which initiates that movement. And our capacities are greater. You know, people talk all the time about how so little of our brain's total potential is ever used. This is how you use more of your brain's potential. For somebody who's then thinking about their body alone, yoga is fine. But when you're thinking about the total experience of life, and for a lot of people these days are aware that, well, I don't want my body to outlive my brain, meaning I don't want to get Alzheimer's, I don't want to get dementia. What good is living for 10 more years if I don't know I'm living? And, you know, there's a sadness associated with it, but people are really seriously tuned into this. Can I prevent this? Well, part of the answer is, and part of the reason that the incidence of Alzheimer's disease is so low in India has a lot to do with yoga. And so has to do with other things as well. But so we have control over this. Using yoga is not just using our body, it's using parts of our brain, as you just described.
Yeah. And, you know, the Bikram practice in particular, I think, really has a strong focus on building that inner strength, that inner fortitude to sort of be in this very challenging environment. It's 105 degrees, you're sweating, you're working really hard, and to be able to sort of build the strength like we were talking about earlier, to just stay in this room, get through this next pose, get through this next series. There's really something that really makes you leave feeling accomplished, that really has just benefits outside of the yoga room, really, for me in particular.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about is how social yoga is. You know, the idea that people come together, often you'll see, because people have similar schedules if they're going to come to a particular class, the same people, or at least groups of the same people each time, and there's something very pleasant about that. And familiar, and a community is developed. And often people don't have other communities. You know, you might have your work community, that's fine. You might have a family, sort of a community. You might have neighbors, but not necessarily communities that are developed as a result of shared interests, that transcends something practical like work or even raising kids. That there is there's something about just a personal proclivity and interest. And especially at the time when it's not about work, it's really not about what it looks like or what happens at the end. It's just about spending the 90 minutes together for no other reason than being there, which is not something we exercise much at all, which is just being there. And so part of yoga, you know, you're on this, 2 foot by 5 foot or whatever mat. That's your little space, and that's being there. You're there. You're right on that little rectangle. Pretty remarkable.
We have a group of guys that come on, so we have a 6 a.m. class every day, and we have a group of guys that come, and they call themselves the Three Amigos. And so, like you're saying, they're connecting over this shared passion for yoga. And so, and even, some of our other students will say, oh, we haven't seen you in a while, where have you been? And they'll ask us, oh, where's so-and-so been? Like, there really is developing a community there that's really special.
So tell us a little bit about your place. Tell us, what you feel proud of. How, what kind of personal, input, and ideas that you have in your creativity to produce this studio.
Yeah, it's a good use of the word creativity, because I'm the finance guy. So I was the guy saying, okay, we need new flooring. We need to improve the heating system. We need to improve the bathrooms. But Carolyn was the one with the creativity to say, but we really need to change the feel in here. And truthfully, the studio had been redone about 2 years before. And as the finance guy said, but this isn't economical. We can't. We don't need to repaint all the walls. We don't need to open up the front of the store or the front of the studio and make it a retail space or a place where people can socialize. Carolyn gets all the credit for the changes that really mattered in the studio, which is the words we're hearing is it feels so clean, it's so bright, it's very conducive to people interacting socially, which I never appreciated at all until we started hearing this kind of feedback. So the studio looks very, very different than a studio that had just been redone 2 years previously. And Carolyn gets the credit for understanding the importance of the visual component to it and the feel that people have when they walk into the studio. But we just received a great review on Yelp just today that we saw from somebody who had just started at the studio for the first time in January. And those are the words that you keep hearing, and is cleanliness, a sense of happiness, just to positivity. Again, can't put that numbers to that, but Carolyn certainly convinced me that they were good investments to make, and they were by far, frankly, more important than the flooring or the heating. So I think we're really proud of what the studio looks like and where we've come with it. And yet, as with our practice, it's still growing, and there's still additional changes we want to make and continue to improve on it.
It's so great to hear the story of people putting their minds together and their hearts together to create something that not only is going to benefit them, business, but it's being shared with other people, and that it's the other people who give you the most satisfaction. There are the economics, of course, that is a big part of why we do a lot of what we do. But then when we get that additional satisfaction of knowing that we've made a difference in somebody else's life, it sort of gives us the sense that what we're doing is really right on.
Yeah.
We have somebody on the line who's interested in speaking to us. Are you ready for a call?
Great.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio.
Yes, hi. My name is Kathy, and first of all, I've had a lot of experience with Bikram and hot yoga, both, many years ago, and I loved it. I just saw the benefits, and I honestly, having done many other things and had suffered so many different injuries in, different types of exercise programs, and I also love the whole integrative part of it, just in terms of overall wellness, and I found it to be such a holistic practice, and was just enamored with it. All that said, I kind of drifted away, as we all do, and life changed, and I moved, and all of that, and the point is that I'm really thinking about going back, and this entire conversation is certainly inspiring. The only thing is I've been online, and this I saw even back when I was practicing. The medical community, for whatever reason, just doesn't buy into all of the health benefits of hot yoga. And, in some cases they'll even say, you risk issues of high blood pressure and overextension of your muscles because you're heated and all of that. And I can personally say I've never been injured. I've never seen anyone injured in a hot yoga class. No one's ever been carried out on a stretcher. I just don't get why the pundits of exercise physiology, and in particular, doctors who've never been in this class, and I'm not sure, but are there even any studies of just how amazing and all of the internal benefits that come with this practice?
It's a great question, and it's definitely something that I looked a lot into because similarly I wanted to heal myself, and as with a lot of things I did in my life, I wanted to make sure I was comfortable because certainly going into the first class I was anything but comfortable, and just wanted to walk out, and the intensity of it, and like you said, you definitely hear some in the medical community, and I feel like it's the Western medical community that it doesn't subscribe nearly as much as the Eastern approach of your body's ability to heal itself and see the benefits. But I think long-winded way of saying that, yes, there are studies. There's actually a recent study out of the Washington University, and Casey Mace, who is a professor of public health. And what the studies found, and this was specifically on Bikram, is improved balance, lower body strength, range of motion for both the upper and lower body. And it also found arterial stiffness was improved, metabolic measures like glucose tolerance and cholesterol levels, as well as bone density and perceived stress, all these benefits. She was also clear to say that dehydration is definitely a challenge, not surprisingly, when you have that level of intensity. And we certainly, I'm sure you may have experienced it when you practice.
Absolutely.
Dehydration is a challenge, and we can't emphasize enough the importance of drinking plenty of water before, and almost as importantly, and maybe even more importantly, is plenty of water afterwards. But I think what you'll find is when you look at the Eastern studies that have been done. So studies out of India, not surprisingly, and Dr. Finkelstein touched on it in terms of the way people age in India, and whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia, the mental benefits they have great studies on. But to your point, when you look at Western studies, they are a little bit more conflicted, I would say, or a little bit more based off of the potential challenges that come with the intense heat. But, we've had people with sciatica. We've had people with, like myself, the amount of back issues that we have had of people coming with back issues, but arthritis. We have a person with MS who practices, who swears that, it has had much more significant change than any of the medication they've been given. So it's a great question. There are still a lot of studies that are being conducted. But I think you're absolutely right in that, there are conflicting reports out of the medical industry, and I would just say most of the Western, or most of the negatives that you'll read are out of the Western sort of medical approach, where they have some concerns. But I think Carol and I can give you hundreds of examples of people, and this is really, Julie, you asked Dr. Finkelstein about the benefits. The benefit has been seeing people come and seeing the health benefits that these people have experienced has been by far the most rewarding experience for us.
Well, and that's kind of the irony, because if everything you can read about the benefits of this practice are written by people who've actually done it and have, and I'm one of those people that really noticed the difference. And, again, just, I think it's time to go back. But I just thought after all these years, Western medicine, I thought would catch up. And it appears they haven't, but, hopefully at some point, because I there are naysayers out there, even when I talk about it, who have, latched on to the whole blood pressure thing. And I just can't see, I personally did not see that, or anyone having those issues, and just reaping the benefits. But thank you for clarifying. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Well, thank you for your call.
Right.
Thank you very much. And good luck getting back into it. I just add one thing, too, which is, while I agree there are a lot of physicians who remain very skeptical, and some actually cynical about a lot of holistic approaches to health, meaning something that's not sanctioned by the medical community directly, that there may not be the types of studies they like to see. Though I will say quite quickly after that there are many studies now that show clear benefits. So it's almost getting to the point where it's now not good medical practice to not consider or suggest to people something like yoga. Now, there are common sense things to always consider. So one is, somebody's frail, elderly, on blood pressure medications, tends to get dehydrated, tells you they can't tolerate the summer without feeling lightheaded. Well, you might tell them, well, maybe Bikram yoga isn't the first thing they think of. Doesn't mean they shouldn't try some yoga. So common sense always prevails.
Yes.
But doctors with more than common sense also know that movement is very important for people. Stress management is very important for people. Socialization is very important for people. There's no controversies in any of those things. And sometimes yoga is the best vehicle for somebody to get out. It's becoming more and more available. You see it in senior centers. You see it in, homes. You see, for people who have various disabilities.
Absolutely.
You see it, people who can't get out of a chair. There's chair yoga. There are ways now that people appreciate, because not everyone is doing this. So let's try to get more people moving, breathing, being present, as you've described and as we've discussed, are all the benefits. So part of the reason I have this show is because as a physician, I want to make sure that there is this voice from a physician that encourages people to consider carefully these things and frankly find a physician who's a little bit more open-minded. Because what Kathy has described are the remnant of closed-minded physicians, and there are many who are not looking at the research, who are not considering this. And that's okay. Everyone has a right to practice what they want.
Sure.
But you, as the patient, should, I find somebody who practices more in concert with your belief systems.
Right.
So that you can be encouraged to continue on your path. And I think then the bottom line is, how do you feel? After trying something.
There's something to be said for, sort of doing this practice and then saying, how do I feel? Am I losing weight? What are my goals for this practice? Am I feeling more mindful? Am I more patient? Am I feeling more flexible? Does my body feel better? Am I sleeping better? Whatever the case is, whatever it is your goal for the practice is, think to yourself, how do I feel about this without having someone else tell you how you feel based on a blood test or whatever it is. And so there's a little bit of trust in yourself that comes along with this practice that I think is really developed through this practice.
So I think, bottom line, it's really worth a try.
I think so.
And for people to, see for themselves. So tell us a little bit about how people can find out more about your studio.
Well, so we have our website is www.balanceyogany.com, and on there we have the schedule is on there. We have a little FAQ section. So for people who are newer to yoga, newer to hot yoga, such like what do I wear? What am I supposed to bring with me? Do you have a shower there? Things like that. They're all answered on there. We have special events coming up. We have like a fun partner workshop that we're doing this Saturday, I think at 1:30.
1:30, yeah.
We're planning
ahead of Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Is a little Valentine's Day. Yeah.
And we're doing some other special events that we were talking about, sort of just build a community. On the website, what else? There's,
we're on Facebook.
Yeah.
We're on
Facebook,
Instagram.
We're on Instagram.
Carolyn has got
also
us.
Balance Yoga NY.
Yeah.
Where is the studio actually located?
So it's at 244 Boston Post Road, and so it's in the same shopping center as a Mrs. Green's Market. There's a Staples there, CVS. Sort of like.
Yeah,
it's like
Pet Pantry is right next to us, so it's a nice little area of like-minded business owners to us. We have a lot of overlap with Miss Green's, not surprisingly, but we're also happy to provide the WVOX listeners with a special free class. If you mention WVOX and as big fans, we're hopeful that there are other fans out there that will come to the studio, and if they do come to the studio and mention the radio interview that we've done or just the station, then we're going to provide them with a free class.
That's really, really nice of you, and that feels really good. I think the idea here is to facilitate community health and wellness. The more we can help our neighbors, the better off we all are. Is there a way to get to the studio relatively easily through mass transit?
Yes. So there's a bus stop right in front of the studio, conveniently enough, and so that's the. I don't know the number line, but it is.
It's on the website, though.
It's on the website. The Larchmont train station is very close by, so there are multiple ways to get to the studio.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Really good luck and wellness yourselves.
Thanks
so much.
Yeah. So, and in keeping with some of these events, we have some at Sunraven, the home of slow medicine, coming up too. So, Dave and Carolyn, I want to invite you to join us. On February 27th is the next new moon, and we have a new moon ceremony.
I saw that
every night of the new moon, and the next will be February 27th at Sunraven. I'll be at Gilda's Club talking to people there who usually come, people who have cancer or know somebody with cancer.
Yeah.
Those open to the whole public in White Plains on March 14th. March 18th, we have a Saturday day planned called a Day of Slow Living, where we bring people to our home, we feed them nourishing juices and teas, and then do some movement, some reflection. When the weather is good, we go out to the garden and spend time there. And the following day, on the 19th, is when our Slow Medicine Garden Co-op CSA begins. It's the open house and introductions, because spring is around the corner, which we are looking forward to.
Yes.
There's a lot of activities.
Absolutely.
There. So, and that's all of this, for those of you who are listening, are open. We'd love to see you. You can email me at any time, michael@slowmedicinedoctor.com. Our website is slowmedicine.org. So the last minute or so, I wonder if you have any final thoughts or that you'd like to share. Words of wisdom. Caroline, come on, you had a good wisdom about taking time for yourself.
Yeah, and also I think there's value in just trying something. Sometimes coming out of our comfort zone, whether or not we feel intimidated for whatever reason. You've never done yoga, I'm not as flexible as other people. Whatever variety of reasons you have that is sort of all the list of things that are telling you don't do this, maybe think of the 1 or 2 or 3 reasons, however many, that make you feel like this is maybe something I should try. If you don't try it, you don't know. And for me, I really find that the more I do it, the more it becomes something I want to do. And so the consistency of the practice feels really nice. So
exercising open-mindedness, which I think is really good.
Yes.
As people get older, they get more contracted, and this is the way, I think, lots of great suggestions.
Yeah.
Thank you. Look, I wish you all well out there. And next week, again, listen to the conversation I had last week with some students from the Bronx. I think you'll find that inspiring as well. I'll be back in 2 weeks to talk to you.